You got it. He's just getting set up really quick.
No worries.
So what's the focus of this session?
Yeah, so we crawled in the first session, right? And we are still here, right? So look, the first session was crawl. Like I tried to explain like what are the basic blocks, give you some foundation. Now you take those building blocks and you put that together into applications. And those applications start from very simple or basic to multi-agent. And that's what I'm hoping to show you. So look, the first thing to think of is an LLM enhanced workflow. We had earlier the discussion like, okay, when do you have an agent? When do you have a workflow that is kind of deterministic? And I think the simplest answer is you always go deterministic as you can get away with it, right? Because why would you go to an agent if you suddenly introduce some stochastic behavior that potentially has unwanted effects? So here's a simple, I don't know, an application that I built in a demo, and it's a mortgage context. It's a title review, right? So if you think of a title of a property and the title needs to be transferred, someone needs to create a preliminary title report, and then the mortgage company needs to kind of go over that. It's a long document with all the legalities in there, and if they make an error in that, it can have huge consequences, both financially for the mortgage taking company or for the customer who ends up with a property that's not fully theirs or it has liens on it or whatnot. So it's a high stake case, and in fact, like underwriters, or they need to go over this title report and make sure that they properly understand like each and every aspect, they clear that, and then the property can get transferred. So look, naturally you want to do this, and then you think like, oh, let's use an agent for it. So how would an agent work? Well, a title report like that is 30 pages, and well, the naive way would be you give that to ChatGPT or like an LLM and say, check it, right? Is there something weird in here? Or you develop the prompt a little bit. But that is not at all kind of reliable. That's not how you solve a business problem. So the way here I figured you would solve it is the same way an underwriter solves it, right? She looks at the document in terms of themes. The first thing is like extract each theme. And then per theme, you start kind of understanding what do I need to do with that theme, right? Is this in the correct order, or does this have the correct content or not? And so I created here well, not an agent, a workflow, a deterministic workflow that first takes this 30-page document and cuts it up in themes. What themes? I'll get to that, but some themes are very simple, right? They are just a part of the document. Say, oh, this is Annex B or something like that. That's compact. Some other things are across the document, and this LLM needs to kind of pull different information elements, needs to know what it needs to pull, and then create a little theme out of that. Then, for every of those themes, you do basically two things, right? You start processing that theme using a large language model. First, you need the policy of the mortgage company that says like, okay, these are our rules. And the second thing is that you need to kind of do a legal smoke test on this, because like the title of the company that provides the title report, of course, they're not gonna say, oh, there's a problem here. They're gonna cover something that is legally so like, oh, okay, we're just smudging it out a little bit so that we're not liable, but at the same time, we can disclose the full thing. So you need to have basically a process going on for each theme that looks at two things. One is this smoke test, and the second thing is just a hard policy check. Then you do that for each of those themes, and then you feed all those themes in a final LLM call and say, look, conclude out of this what is the case. And so here's an example of such a report, right? It's in this case, a California preliminary title report, 30 pages deep. And you feed that into this model, and this comes out, right? A final report. It's very small. Summary of findings, ownership and vesting, legal property description, monetary liens and encumbrances. Those are the themes, right? And every theme gets assigned a pass, escalate, or fail. And of course, like if one is fail, the whole document is fail. And what we learned in the meantime, when I got feedback when I presented this to an underwriter, they said like, well, I very much agree with this. However, we need to reformulate this in conditions, right? Rather than saying, oh, this is a hard fail. We need to kind of say, well, what needs to be solved in order to solve this? But at the end of the day, it does its job exactly as it should be. And there's no there's no stochastic behavior here of put this in an agent and the agent will determine like at will what shall I look at, right? It's a very, very clear process. You cut it up in pieces, you know what the pieces are. Those pieces are just kind of configurable, if you will. If someone says like, I have a different process, I want different kind of extracted features or extracted themes, you configure something in the agent or in the LLM enhanced workflow, and poof, you have your new extraction and so on. So then the question is, how do you build this, right? And I'll go very quickly over this, but I'm not by any means a mortgage expert. So, but there's AI. Right, and again, here's the condensation of time. Like otherwise, I need to communicate with someone who's trying to explain me what categories they look at, and I make notes, and then I need to kind of encode that, and I don't understand things. And so I just go to AI, and it's like, look, here is a preliminary title report. Like, and this title report was actually annotated because that's what companies do. So they list 49 items. Can you list them, right? Just to make sure that, sure, here, they all listed out, right? So great, but so if you were to act as a mortgage providing company and you had to thoroughly analyze such a report, what logical categories would you use to divide your analysis up in and give a two-line explanation of each category, right? So here we go, right? Ownership and vesting, legal property description, monetary liens and encumbrances. You see, I mean, those were the categories I used. And it comes up with 12 categories. And when I checked that with an actual underwriter, they said like, that's exactly what I would do. So, I mean, I just based myself on ChatGPT giving me the right information here, but you use that and you're like 90% on the way, right? You're like, okay, and then the conversation continues, right? No, I'm asking for something like this, right? So it gave me some output it didn't want. It's like, no, wait. You're an experienced title researcher for a mortgage lender, and you will be given a title report, and your task is to extract the relevant parts from text. So what is your prompt, right? What would create me that prompt? It's like, okay, I'll provide that prompt for you, right? So you see that I'm using a prompt to create a prompt. That's a huge advantage, and you'd be surprised how good LLMs are at creating prompts that do the stuff that you want. So it creates those prompts. And here, for example, is the prompt that now is in the coding environment, but it says like, okay, the monetary liens and encumbrances, right? They say like, okay, create a prompt for every theme. Right? And here's the legal language smoke test. Right? Review the extracted text for legal phrasing that may obscure material risk to the lender, etc. Vague and evasive lien descriptions without instrument numbers or payoff info. Look, the cool thing about this is you can read this and you think like, well, you know what? We need to formulate this slightly different. And again, I'm not an underwriter, but if an underwriter looks at this, it's like, yeah, that's a good way in the direction, maybe a 90% there, there, but my 10% is I add this, right? And the part 2 is the reference against the policy, where you see you take the policy, so that's the RAG solution, right? So you take the piece of text, you reference that against the database with all the policy information, the right information gets pulled back in, and then the LLM compares that. And here are the instructions, what it needs to do and how it needs to compare. And this is, of course, like specific for every theme. If you would do it one prompt for every theme, it would be too bland for me. It is hard to kind of control if something is maybe too specific or it doesn't work. If you change something for one prompt, it would have effects down the stream that you don't want. So that's why I thought like I want one prompt per theme processing. So this is how it looks in Bedrock. This is Bedrock flows. It's a deterministic thing that in the right places you just consult an LLM. And at the end of the day, this is a stream that you can look at, but it is infrastructure as code, if you will. So it lives as code. You can really configure it and say deploy, and then it builds this in the cloud, and then you can score it, you can version it, you can test it with individual prompts and individual themes that you test against the prompt to see what comes out. And so there you have it. So look, that is the very simple way. If you have a process and you're like, I can use an LLM to enhance that process. Okay. Next is the pattern for co-creation, right? And Manish shared a number of those things already. I want to start off with this one. Let me see. And that is my demo. All right, so here we have an agent, kind of, that helps you create presentations, right? So it's very helpful, hopefully. I can talk to it. Hey there, how's it going? Let's see if it is responsive. It's a little bit slow. It's a demo, but it is supposed to work.
Oi, mate. I'm fizzing like a can of Red Bull in a tumble dryer. How about you? What's your name? Or shall I just start calling you Mysterio, the Slide Whisperer, until you spill the beans?
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm looking for a presentation on AI agents. Is that something that you can help me with? So, look, this guy needs to help me create my presentation, right? Hopefully he creates some slide text for me, and that I can then use.
AI agents, you got it. Nobody does it better than Air India agents. Buckle up, tray tables up. I'm about to take you on a journey. And I want zero complaints about the in-flight snacks. All right, here come the slides.
Well, you see it produces slides, but AI agents, that was unfortunately misunderstood. Well, you understand that I'm not looking for Air India agents, but for artificial intelligent agents. Can you say something intelligent about that?
All right. Keep your tray table down. You said AI agents. How was I supposed to know you didn't mean airline royalty? Anyway, let's get serious. I'm about to drop some actual brain power on artificial intelligence agents. Ready for a crash course that won't end in lost luggage.
Right, so look, this is obviously kind of a joke, but it is, so what you see here is I can interact with an AI. I try to infuse some humor in it and some accent because I think that's funny. At the same time, it does create slide text for me, right? And so if you look at it, and this is, I think, one of the key things to realize that an agent like that does have a backend, and you can just kind of configure that the way you want, right? So I have a base prompt. This is Brody the press wizard, and you describe his behavior, right? So you tell his personality, his behavioral rules. He's funny, he's warm, offbeat, right? That's why he starts saying funny stuff. And then you basically start to describe what his input is, right? So here you see I input every time the memory state and the previous turn. So that's very useful because it allows me to kind of now understand Brody or the avatar, that if I say, yes, and then the question is yes to what, right? So he needs to understand the previous context to see what I said yes to, right? And then, so here per template, basically you configure the specific the prompt that you want to have, and then you can monitor the conversation. And the idea here is that, let me go where we were, I already. Yes, so here, so it's like, how's it going? I think that's where I started. And you see exactly the messages that I sent. And what I configured here as an output is that it rationalizes, it tells me, as part of the output, it tells me why it responded the way it was supposed to respond. And I think that's an AI agent component that I yet not see in existing agents. But I think it's very important to like have the agent as part of its output always explain itself. And you can kind of rely on it. I tested this, and it basically says like, hey, this is the first turn, or I was instructed to say this and that. And so if it shows some behavior that you do not like, that is where you read why it gave that behavior. And so you go back to your prompt and you update that. Okay, so look, this is a very, very quick thing through an agent. I was actually going to show you the context-aware co-creation. And so, again, this is a kind of a DIY demo. I was planning to have you all go through this, but it works as follows here. That is this guy. So, is it readable, by the way? Yes. Yeah, kind of. Look, I think this pattern is super useful. And you can use this throughout the enterprise in many different fashions. But you'll see, and most people, if you do this already, but not in the interface that is presented here, right? So, look, here's an email from Sarah, and Sarah says to HR, hey, we need a new guy, and they need to be some Python programmer, and our database is a mess, and whatnot, right? So I have a number of use cases here, and we start defining the job role. The fun thing is, like, I would really like invite you to try this yourself, and then see how you can communicate with it. But you can also easily kind of change the prompt here, right? And so, or the system prompt, and that helps you kind of understand what instructions do you need to give for this to work. Right, so we have an assistant here that takes that context into account. I can switch it off, and then it doesn't have that context. But let me allow that the mic, and then sorry. So like, yes, this is great. Can you take Sarah's email and then write a professional-looking job rec out of this? Right, so it takes now my voice input. It looks at the email, and then it, based on that, is creating an artifact, poof, and here we have the HR rec for what it needs to be doing, right? It's nice to have, there's a qualification. It then helps me guide what should I ask next, or what can I add next. But I look at this and I say like, yeah, well, this is great, but I would rather have someone that's like 6 to 8 years of experience, right? And you see that it takes that information into account, thinks about it, and then edits that in the ad. Oh, and here you see, are the colors visible? It should highlight in red and green what it solves, but it looks a little bit, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. But it's so there's actually colors, but I see it blends out a little bit over there. But so it doesn't rewrite the whole ad, right? It really kind of goes in there and says like, okay, this is what needs to get changed. And the way that works is that every time the agent or the LLM is aware of what it created and now what I'm asking. And so I can demonstrate here as well that I'm saying like, all right, so look, I think I also want someone who's Dutch, right? So let's see what happens there. And it's thinking. So here you saw it, yep. Boom. So exactly, and now you basically hit some kind of a guardrail, right? To avoid, you may have to phrase this kind of more subtle because to avoid discrimination issues. So not only is a pattern like this useful to help you create something, but it can also really prevent you from basically doing the wrong thing. And that is, of course, for an experienced HR person, this will never be an issue. But if you have a bunch of company policies and someone new comes in, this can be a very helpful guideline. Okay, so look, if you would try this, there's a whole bunch of similar things that you can do with exactly the same pattern, right? Let me just compose an email here. We get an email, and someone needs to. You need to respond to that. I say, this is a wonderful idea. Please say that we welcome a partnership, and let's continue with a meeting next Wednesday. Right? I mean, if this is going to be the future, right? You talk to your thing, and it here, boom, there's an email, and I don't have to type this. This is just it is typed for me. It's in perfect language, and now again I can kind of go in there and edit that a little bit, either manually or I give some update instructions that it rewrites my email, and so this pattern works. Like across, right? It works for SQL statements, for writing legal contracts, and whatnot. All right, so that is the co-creation. A slightly different version of that co-creation is, also mentioned by Manish, is basically the guided learning. And so when we started with this, the development of this whole idea of a workshop, we thought like, it is going to be really hands-on. So I developed a Crew AI workshop where everyone would literally create their own trainings. So I had AI code for me, like a development in AWS where you have 20 images that are basically Docker instances of Crew AI, where you visually create agents, and well, you can still do it. But as part of that, because how do you create an agent? You can actually launch a training, right? And this training is, again, like this whole idea of like you have a co-creation, but now it's kind of more a guided thing, right? So are you ready to begin? Yes, I'm ready to begin. And it creates the content on the fly. And then it starts kind of to prompt you. It can answer any questions you have about the material. It can test you. You can say like, okay, I want to skip certain parts because I'm not interested. Let me see. It takes a little. Oh yeah, here we go. So introduction to Crew AI, right? What is Crew AI? And so here's your agentic tool and your full training for that. And you can say, test me to test your knowledge, skip to go to the hand-on guidance, or ask any questions if it's not clear, right? Again, I would invite you to kind of just do this, maybe to learn Crew AI, because that's a fun tool to play around with, but also kind of to understand this pattern, right? And you can play around with it, and you can see what are the questions it actually asks. And it is surprising to me that it does, for me, a relatively good job. All right, so Now, the next thing is so that's the co-creation, right? And that's a very useful pattern. But the other thing is that I think Gen AI think workflow, right? Just not like a point application. And I built a demo for this, and let me just pull it up instead of discussing it first. It is the recruitment demo. And this, look, it first starts in the same way, right? So the idea is like I have a number of resumes and I want to find the best candidate. But sure, that is a kind of a point solution. If you think of that as a Gen AI workflow, it doesn't start with having a job description and resumes. It starts with creating that job description. I kind of showed that earlier, right? But so the idea is here, I want Python dev, right? Let's take it like that. And so you see immediately it creates a role definition for you that you can edit and whatnot. But suppose I'm happy with this and I save this and I continue. Now I have basically a directory with all kind of resumes, and it takes that job description that I just created, and it references that individually against all those resumes and then find the best candidates, right? And so here you see it comes up with a nice format, right? So it names the name, highly recommended, recommended, a description, matching skills, missing skills. So it truly, this looks like, well, okay, this is nice, but I just instructed the computer to build this for me. I was not involved in designing all this reporting and everything. I just said, look, I need something that looks good, that matches resumes against a description, and there we go. Right, so say that I now, I'm interested in a few candidates, and so I select this guy and I select this guy. And the next step of this is basically me having an interview with their digital twin, right? And again, like think workflow of Gen AI. So you start with creating this job description, you select a person, and now are you gonna call the person or are you gonna talk to him? Well, why not interviewing, if you will, their resume, right? Have you ever read a resume? People have lengthy resumes and you go over the line, oh, education, this and this and this job here. Like, why can't you you have to rethink this whole process and think like, okay, maybe it can just provide me the answers that I need. And of course, then you call that digital twin interview because that is maybe some marketing fluff on top of it, but having a chat interaction on top of a resume is incredibly useful instead of you having to go through this whole resume. Okay, so that is in a nutshell that, and then I think we have a similar, I'm 7 minutes, I have 7 minutes left, is that right? That's right. Yeah, so look, I'm gonna skip this guy, but in short, there's another kind of workflow demo where I built an application that goes into a database, looks at all the schemas, and helps people to understand what information, what schema they need to be looking into if they're looking for certain information. And once they have selected the schema, they can basically create a query using a conversational interface without knowing any SQL. Right? This is again a pattern that any kind of basically enterprise uses, right? Because there's many business people that go to IT or to a data science group is like, oh, but we want this and this data, and then they have to pull that together and they keep coming back for different data. And so this is kind of self-service if you think of it in the whole Gen AI terms, because it's a conversational interface, it helps you select what data you need, and then helps you create this SQL query without you ever having to know SQL. All right, so I skipped that demo, but it is available to play around with. Remember this was the image that I created out of this article, right? If you want to read the article, I think it's interesting, but here what I did is I had a hypothesis or an idea about certain, let me I didn't log out there, about prompting, right? So, of course, that was an AI topic, but I said like, well, look, if I want to write an article and I have some very specific idea, I think I'm creative, so I try to all word that out and then have AI kind of create an article out of that. Let me compare that with what I call a low effort prompt. Right? Because I create this article, I put it on LinkedIn. It takes me not too long, but it's still an effort. If I can just prompt the LLM, write me an article on LinkedIn that is engaging and has a strong hook, and that article is as strong as the article that comes from my creative mind, then why should I think that I'm creative, right? Because if this low effort prompt gives me the same quality of article, I shouldn't be writing, right? Okay, so that was the base idea, right? And I created a number of other conditions that are too specific to go into, but I created 6 ways to generate an article, right? One was the stream of consciousness and then the low effort and whatnot. But now I have 6 articles. So how do I now judge? I can look, oh, I like my article better than the LLM generated. Yeah, I'm biased, right? So what did I do? I took an LLM, I took actually 3 LLMs, and I had those LLMs judge those articles, and then rate them, right? So like, okay, what should I rate them on? Well, on clarity of information, on originality, on message, on engagement, on structure, whatnot, right? So it comes off with a number of characteristics. And so not one LLM, but 3 different LLMs that judge those 6 articles. And there was another condition where I labeled them and didn't label them, that's a detail. But now I have all those conclusions, so I yet use another LLM that says, hey, I have 6 articles judged by 3 different LLMs. Let me now summarize the overall conclusions, right? What did you conclude over, what did those 3 LLMs conclude about those 6 conditions of articles? Anyway, so the conclusions are, luckily for me, I guess, they said like, hey, we all recognize the originality of your thought, like yes, and then they said the low effort prompt was not too interesting. Okay, cool, so humans still count. That is the final conclusion there. But what you see here is the mode in which you can work, right? Yeah, an LLM as a judge is an incredibly strong thing. So in many situations, you have the workflow where something is being created, either by LLMs themselves or not, by humans, and you have an LLM who acts on that information, and you can even have a secondary LLM to judge the first LLM's work, right? And that is a very useful Gen AI pattern, I think. Okay, last thing, I have 2 minutes left. That's the autonomous agents. So, look, this is the single agent use case. And I can show you the demo, but let's first start with the picture here. So someone makes a complex booking, right? I fly from here to there, then I rent a car, then I need a hotel, then I have a day trip here and this and that. And so one day before you actually leave, there's a problem. Okay, that's super stressful, right? Because if you made this booking, you need to call your hotel, can I extend? And when I do, I rebook, and oh, this day I'm done. So wouldn't it be lovely if an agent can take care of that? Well, it would, right? Because they would literally, like an agent kind of starts rebooking, and then you have this conversational interface, and it tells you, oh, this is my new proposal, do you agree? And you say like, well, I was actually planning to do this on that day, can we rebook? And this thing goes back and rebooks until you're happy, right? And you say like, okay, book, confirm, and it arranges everything for you. Cool, right? This is a valid use case, you understand that. But yet, here's the question. If you want to build this, right, then wait, how are you gonna test this? And I can write some instructions in an LLM that say, do some rebooking, but wait, in order for me to test that agent, I need to have a lot of itineraries, right? Okay, well, maybe the company that we're doing this for provides me with itineraries. But then, on the other end, you have this kind of rebooking that needs to happen, right? And so what how do I ensure that my booking agent, right, or the ones that solve the problem, is going to rebook? It needs to call an API, but obviously this is somewhere on itineraries in the past. And how do you know that at what time was a booking available, or how do you deal with that, right? Because it needs to call an API to make that booking, and you can't do that in retrospect. So here's the solution, right? You use agents. So now you basically train your agent with the help of other agents. And so the very first thing is that I build an agent that generates itineraries. So I say like, hey, I want to fly to New York, I want to see the Statue of Liberty, whatever, right? And it says, okay, from here, here's an itinerary. Then today I set a disruption, but of course you can automate that. Then I provide that itinerary in a certain format to the booking agent, and I basically inform not the booking agent, but the agent that solves the disruption. And then I kind of give a hint to the booking agent how difficult it should make the life of the itinerary agent, right? Because, of course, if you call the booking agent and the booking agent says like, oh, your flight is canceled, well, I have one that goes 5 minutes later and you can take that one, yeah, then there's no problem to be solved, right? Because you rebook and that's all good. So you give some difficulty parameter, and the booking agent says like, oh, I'm sorry, I only have a flight available 3 days later, right? And so then this itinerary agent has to kind of like start moving things around and start rebooking and asking for other things and whatnot. So you see that the booking agent here is the kind of adversarial agent that makes the life of the itinerary agent more difficult, and that is in order to basically train that agent to really do its job. Okay, so let me pull that up. And that is the itinerary demo. So here, I generate an itinerary. Let me say, I want to go to New Delhi and visit Agra, and then I want to fly on to Mumbai, and from Mumbai I want to fly back home to New York. And that all takes 2 weeks. Right, something like that. I don't have to say anything. If I just don't say anything, it takes a random itinerary. But here's the very first agent that takes some kind of clues and generates an itinerary for me. Right, here we go. So my itinerary is, and of course this is fully fictional, right? But you see Air India, probably if you look it up, it kind of matches, right? And so then it goes to Hyatt in New Delhi, and it has a car rental, and then I go to Agra for a guided tour, and then I take the Vistara, I have no idea, but probably in local Indian airline, and then I stay in Marriott, right? I see it forgot it didn't pick up on the hint for the flight back to New York, and it has to do with the fact that I chose only six steps. Right, but so now let me set a disruption here, and the disruption is this thing is cancelled, and let's make it hard, right? So, of course, I'm saying we're making this hard because otherwise the booking agent just says like, oh, okay, you can fly tomorrow, and then there's really no disruption at all. Now, the first thing that you have to think about is like, truly, what is the information that you need to give to the rebooking agent, right? You have to give, of course I can just give the itinerary, but I figured like I need to give some dependency graph. And this dependency graph is what you can act on. It says like, okay, this happens before that, and that happens after this. And this dependency graph is ingested by the agent. I think it's a bit weird because there's no flight back, but that finally is an input to the agent, right? And so now the agent is ingesting the dependency graph, is starting to communicate to the rebooking agent and says like, okay, I need to solve this because this flight is disrupted and that has impact on all the dependencies. And so it will come back in a second if everything is good. It is so look. It's a relatively complex problem, so it takes a. Here we go, right? So it first, of course, says, "Hey, I'm really sorry to hear that your travel plans were distraught and disrupted. This is what I propose." And so it comes. So from 24th to 26th, the flight was cancelled. Rescheduled to the next available options to restore the trip, and then everything starts being moved. You see, the hotel in New Delhi, where I would arrive the 25th, now goes to the 26th. The car rental moves a little bit and whatnot. Of course, here is now where I can say like, okay, but I don't like something, but just in the order of time, I say book it, right? And so with me booking it, the agent goes back, confirms the travel, and says it is booked. So it gives me the new booking information, and then it provides me with the old and the new schedule. And you see how everything is kind of like moved around in order to fit the new schedule. So look, this is not, I vibe coded this in an evening or something like that, the whole thing. But so it's not perfect, but it's a very good start, and I think it has all the chances to start working as an agent. And then of course you need to kind of properly kind of put the whole thing in an enterprise context. But as a demo, I think it's interesting to see that not only do you have to have an agent there where multiple agents collaborate, but you can use adversarial agents to basically ensure that the agent that you're building does the job exactly what you want it to do. All right, and with that, my time is 0, I see, and I think that was the end of today. Yes, very good.
All right, we have time for one question. You're up.
So this is a great demo. So one question in terms of how you envision this to happen in real life. So both examples that you took, right? One around the travel booking and the other around the recruiting process. What I can see is that each step, in each of those flows, there are steps of checkpoints, right? That, okay, I created a job description. Is this good to go? So how are the agents going to interact with the users? And then will this ever get to a point where it becomes truly autonomous in the sense that the agent knows that you are a Hyatt frequent flyer, you are an Air India 1K member, so I'm good to go with that. How do you think that is going to evolve?
That's a very good question. I'm always a little bit kind of wary about like claims that it should know everything about you and then do the full decisioning, right? Because at the end of the day, there's also so many kind of guardrails about PII data and whether you can use, I don't know, your passport number and then send it to OpenAI and whatnot. So I think that for the demo of the recruitment, the message there is, don't only think like one point Gen AI application, but think workflow. And I cannot directly say that, oh, this application need to be built in an enterprise context. The key is to look at your own processes and see what is the current state, how do you solve this today, and where do you place the cuts, right? Where can you kind of enhance this workflow with Gen AI? And for the foreseeable future, I don't think it's a good idea to have automatic hires based on an AI system that just goes on, right? Potentially, right? So we heard yesterday with the intro, you can conduct interviews based an initial interview, like a scan based on an AI agent that asks you a set of basic questions. I think I can see that work. I thought that was a creative solution. But at the end of the day, look, HR knows exactly what they do. They also have to deal with a budget. They have to deal with like management. They know what kind of the directions are in a company. So it's for me the co-creation that makes it very compelling, right? Because the human is in charge at any point in time, but the friction is away, right? If you need to go to sit down and you need to type out this job description, that takes you half an hour, right? Now it takes you 5 minutes, right? And that is very joyful. And in all those patterns, taking the friction away makes life so much easier, right? So that's for that. For the itinerary agent, today, the idea would be, the suggestion would be, that this is something that you offer as a service to your customers on the website where you do your booking, right? Now, then the first question is, are you going to pay for it? Because you see that the agent has, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 communication steps. It needs quite a bit of information. And then we now not even accounted for similar budgets and all that other stuff, right? So say that it costs you $2. It's a very high amount, but say that it costs between $1 and $2 to call this. Are you going to offer that for free to your customer? I'm not so sure, especially not if the volume is super high. Right? I mean, look at Disney, right? If you're scoring an LLM for every customer, phew, every day, right? That's exactly 200 million times even 10 cents. That is prohibitive. So maybe in this case, and this is like a wild guess, you can think, let me order, or let me, together with the booking, get a disruption insurance. And I pay $5 for that. Right, as an additional amount. But then I'm guaranteed that if there's a disruption, that I have an agent helping me solve this. Well, then your business model is back in order and you can potentially do that, right? And I see that work, right? And obviously it's going to go there because if you see what an agent does solve this, right? It's a complex problem. You give that to the agent with the proper guardrails, with the proper instructions, and it does solve it. You see it. And of course, it's not perfect today, but that is, of course, because it's an evening of work, right? And not like a proper development with the full testing and everything. But like it is very promising, I would say.
All right, thank you. Hey, and thank you for fitting all of that into a 40-minute box.
Yeah, thank you.